The streets were cold and empty, and two boys huddled in a corner trying to keep warm. They had been living like this for months, sometimes even years, with no one to look after them. They had learned to survive by hiding from danger and searching for scraps of food wherever they could find them. The days were long and heavy, and the nights felt endless. Each day they hoped something would change, but the world around them seemed hard and unkind. People walked past them without noticing, and the boys felt invisible and forgotten. They often spoke in whispers to each other, sharing memories of better times and hoping for something better in the future. They had learned not to trust easily, because most people only turned away when they asked for help. One morning the boys were sitting under an old broken bridge. The air was damp, and the wind cut through their thin clothes. They were trying to eat a small piece of bread they had found the night before. It was stale and hard, but it was all they had. They looked at each other and laughed softly, a small sound that barely reached the street. They tried to make the moment lighter, even though their stomachs ached and their bodies shivered. The boys were used to this feeling of emptiness, and it had become a part of their daily life. As they ate, a man walked down the street. He was a black man with calm eyes and a gentle face. He had a sense of quiet strength, and he noticed the boys sitting under the bridge. He paused for a moment and watched them. There was something about the way they moved, their careful and cautious way of looking around, that made him remember himself at their age. He remembered the hunger, the fear, and the cold nights. He felt a pull in his heart, a need to help these boys in a way that was more than just giving food. The man walked closer and knelt down, keeping his distance so he did not scare them. He spoke in a soft voice and asked if they were hungry. The boys froze and looked at him with wide eyes. They had not spoken to anyone kindly in a long time, and they were unsure if this was real. They nodded slowly, unsure if he would turn away or if he was serious. The man smiled gently and reached into a bag he carried. He took out some sandwiches, water, and a small blanket. He placed the food in front of them and waited quietly. The boys stared at the food. Their hands trembled as they reached for it. They could not believe that someone would just give them something without asking for anything in return. They ate quickly, trying to satisfy their hunger before it disappeared. The man watched them patiently, not rushing or forcing anything. He knew that trust was built slowly, and he was willing to wait. After a few minutes, he began to talk to them. He asked about their days and how they managed to live on the streets. The boys were hesitant at first, but the gentle tone of his voice made them feel safe. They started to share small stories about the people they met, the dangers they avoided, and the times they had nowhere to sleep. The man listened carefully, nodding and showing that he understood. He did not judge or interrupt, simply offered his attention and his presence. As the morning passed, the boys began to feel a warmth they had not felt in a long time. It was not just the blanket or the food, but the feeling of being seen and heard. They started to trust the man, slowly letting their guard down. He told them that he could help them find safer places to stay, warm meals, and even a way to learn new things that could help them live better. The boys were surprised by this. They had never heard anyone offer so much without expecting something back. The man told stories of his own childhood, challenges he had faced, and how he overcame them. He spoke of hope, patience, and the importance of believing in oneself. The boys listened intently, imagining a life that could be different from the one they were living now. They began to dream, even if only for a moment, of a future where they were safe and cared for. The day turned into afternoon, and the sun broke through the clouds. The boys felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The man suggested they walk with him for a while, to show them a place where they could stay and rest. They were hesitant, but agreed, trusting the man they had met that morning. They walked through the streets, careful but curious, noticing the small kindness in the world that they had almost forgotten existed. Along the way, the man taught them small lessons about safety and respect. He showed them how to ask for help politely, how to find clean water, and how to look out for each other. The boys absorbed every word, realizing that these small skills could change their life. They felt hope growing inside them, a feeling they had not known for years. By evening, they reached a small community center where people in need could find shelter and food. The boys were amazed at how clean and safe the place was. The man introduced them to the workers, explaining that they were friends and helpers. The boys felt nervous at first, but the warmth and friendliness of the people helped them relax. They were given a small bed, a warm meal, the promise of safety for the night. As they lay down to sleep, the boys thought about the man who had helped them. They could not believe that someone had come into their lives and offered so much care without asking for anything in return. For the first time in a long time, they felt hope. They felt that maybe life could be different, that there could be people who cared about them, and that they were not alone. They made a silent promise to themselves to remember this feeling and to hold on to it no matter what. The man walked away as the sun set, looking back one last time to make sure they were safe. He knew that this was only the beginning, that trust and change would take time. But he also knew that giving hope was the first step to changing lives. And for the first time in a long while, the boys dreamed of a future that felt possible, a future where they could survive and maybe even thrive. The night was calm, and for the first time in years, the boys slept without fear, carrying with them a small but powerful spark of hope that had been given by a stranger who believed in them. The boys woke up in a warm and safe place for the first time in a long time. The soft beds and gentle voices around them made them feel almost like they belonged somewhere. They looked at each other and smiled quietly, a small smile that carried more hope than they had felt in months. The man was there again that morning, sitting calmly in a chair, watching them as they woke up. He nodded at them, a simple gesture that meant he was proud of them for making it through the night. After breakfast, the man began to teach them how to take care of themselves in ways they had not thought about before. He showed them how to wash their faces properly and brush their teeth so they could feel cleaner and more confident. He explained why it was important to keep their clothes neat, and why small habits could make a big difference in how people treated them. The boys listened carefully, eager to learn and trust someone who cared. They asked questions, sometimes silly ones, and the man answered with patience. He also taught them about the city and how to move through it safely. He explained which streets were dangerous and which places they could go for help. He told them how to read signs and how to avoid trouble without being scared all the time. The boys practiced walking with him through quiet streets, learning to stay aware and calm. At first they were nervous, but the man's steady presence helped them feel secure. They began to feel stronger and more capable than they had in years. The man encouraged the boys to speak about their dreams and what they wanted for their lives. One boy said he wanted to learn how to read better and find a job someday. The other boy said he wanted to help people like the man had helped them. The man listened to them without judgment, nodding and telling them that they could achieve these things if they worked hard and believed in themselves. This gave the boys a new kind of hope, a hope that felt real and possible. As the days went by, the man continued to visit them and teach them new things. He showed them how to cook simple meals, how to ask for help politely, and how to manage small amounts of money. The boys began to feel a sense of accomplishment when they could do these things on their own. They started to believe that life could be better, that they had the ability to make it better. The man also taught them about kindness and respect. He explained that treating others with care and consideration could create trust and friendship. He showed them how to listen to others and understand their feelings. The boys practiced these lessons with each other, learning to be more patient and compassionate. They began to understand that life was not just about surviving, but about helping and supporting those around them. Sometimes the man would tell stories from his own life. He shared the struggles he had faced as a boy and how he overcame them. He told them about mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. The boys listened closely, inspired by his experiences. They saw that even someone who had faced many challenges could find a way to succeed and help others. This motivated them to keep trying, even when life seemed hard. The boys also learned about friendship and trust. The man encouraged them to rely on each other and to share their thoughts and feelings. They began to open up more, telling each other about their fears and hopes. They laughed together and supported each other in small ways. These moments created a strong bond between them, and they began to feel like they were part of a small family that cared for one another. One afternoon, the man took the boys to a small library nearby, showed them books, and explained that reading could open doors to new knowledge and opportunities. The boys were amazed by the shelves full of books and they began to explore the stories and lessons inside. The man helped them pick books that were easy to read at first, and they practiced reading together. The boys felt proud when they could read a sentence on their own, and the man celebrated their progress with them. As time went on, the boys started to dream bigger. They imagined finishing school, finding jobs, and living in safe homes. They imagined a future where they could help other children who were in situations like theirs. The man encouraged these dreams, telling them that they were possible if they stayed focused and believed in themselves. The boys felt a growing sense of purpose and determination, even though their past had been full of hardship. The boys began to see that life could offer them more than just survival. They felt the importance of learning, growing, and caring for others. The man showed them that small steps could lead to big changes, and that hope was something worth holding on to. The boys felt a deep gratitude for the man, realizing that his guidance and care were giving them a chance they had never had before. At night, the boys would sit together in their small room, talking quietly about what they had learned that day. They discussed the lessons the man had taught them and imagined what they could do with their new knowledge. They felt proud of themselves for taking small steps toward a better life. The feeling of hope grew stronger with each passing day, and they began to believe that they could create a future that was different from their past. The man continued to visit regularly, always patient and encouraging. He never forced them to do anything, but he guided them gently, showing them the right paths without pushing too hard. The boys began to trust him completely, seeing him as someone who genuinely cared about their well-being and future. They felt safe sharing their thoughts, fears, and dreams with him, knowing he would listen and help them without judgment. Days turned into weeks, and the boys grew more confident and capable. They learned how to navigate the streets safely, how to care for themselves, and how to communicate with others respectfully. They discovered the power of education, kindness, and perseverance. The man watched their progress with pride. Knowing that his guidance was making a lasting difference, the boys realized that they were not alone anymore. They had someone who believed in them, someone who showed them that life could be better, and someone who cared about their growth and happiness. The man had given them more than food and shelter. He had given them hope, trust, and a vision for the future. They understood that hope was not just a feeling, but a tool to build a life worth living. Through these experiences, the boys learned valuable lessons about life, responsibility, and compassion. They understood that while the world could be harsh and unforgiving, there were also people who could make a difference. They felt inspired to carry forward the lessons they had learned, knowing that they could impact others in meaningful ways one day. As came to an end, the boys had changed significantly from the frightened and hopeless children who first met the man. They had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. They had learned to trust, to care, and to dream. And most importantly, they had learned that hope could survive even in the darkest places, and that a single person who cared could change a life forever. The boys had grown used to their new routine, feeling safer and more confident each day. They had learned many lessons from the man, and their hope for the future had grown stronger. But life had a way of reminding them that the path to stability was not always smooth. One day, they received news that they needed to leave the shelter temporarily. There was a situation in the city, and the shelter could not hold them for a few weeks. The boys felt worried and uncertain. They had grown attached to the safety and comfort of the shelter, and they did not know where they would go next. The man sat with them and explained that this was only a temporary challenge. He reassured them that they had learned skills to survive, and that he would still support them, even if they were apart for a while. The boys listened, but could not hide the fear in their eyes. They packed their small belongings carefully, knowing that they would have to rely on their own strength until they could return to safety. As they left the shelter, the city seemed harsher than before. The streets were crowded, noisy, and unfamiliar. The boys had to find places to sleep each night and search for food with more effort. They faced cold nights and long days, and sometimes they felt exhausted and hopeless. They missed the man and the sense of guidance he had provided. During this time, the boys began to realize how much they had learned from him. They remembered the lessons about safety, kindness, and perseverance. These lessons became tools they could use to navigate the challenges they faced. Even when the world seemed cruel, they found small ways to protect themselves and help each other. Their bond grew stronger as they relied on one another, sharing food, finding safe places to rest, and looking out for danger. The man never stopped thinking about them, even though he could not be with them every day. He found ways to check on their progress. He asked the shelter to provide updates, and sometimes left small notes and supplies for them to find. The boys discovered these messages and felt reassured that someone believed in them and cared for their well-being. This small connection gave them courage to keep going, even when they felt alone. One day, the boys encountered a difficult situation. They were near a busy street when a confrontation with older boys threatened to turn dangerous. They remembered the man's advice about staying calm, speaking politely, and avoiding fights when possible. They used the skills he had taught them to defuse the situation. They were nervous, but they managed to escape without harm. Afterward, they felt proud of themselves. They realized that the lessons they had learned were helping them survive in the real world, even without the man by their side. As they continued their journey, the boys encountered both kind and unkind people. Some ignored them or treated them harshly, while others offered help and support. Each experience reminded them that life was a mixture of challenges and opportunities. They remembered the man's words about treating others with respect and understanding. By doing so, they often found small acts of kindness in return. These experiences strengthened their belief that they could shape their own lives with courage and careful choices. The boys also faced moments of doubt and fear. Some nights were particularly hard, with no safe place to sleep and little food to eat. They would talk quietly to each other, sharing worries and fears. They encouraged each other to stay strong and remember the lessons from the man. Their friendship became a source of comfort and resilience. They learned to find hope even in the darkest moments and to hold on to the belief that things could improve. During this time, the boys also discovered hidden talents and skills they had not recognized before. One boy realized he had a good memory and could recall directions and streets easily, which helped them navigate the city. The other boy discovered he had a knack for talking to people and asking for help politely, which often brought small opportunities. They began to see that they were capable of more than they had imagined, and that the man's guidance had prepared them to face challenges on their own. The separation also made the boys appreciate the man even more. They realized how much he had done for them, not just with food and shelter, but with lessons, kindness, and trust. They missed his presence, his stories, and his encouragement. They began to understand that his belief in them had changed the way they saw themselves and their future. They felt gratitude and a desire to honor his efforts by staying strong and moving forward. Over time, the boys found ways to improve their situation. They discovered temporary work that provided small amounts of money, enough to buy food or save for essentials. They learned how to manage these resources carefully, making every coin count. They took turns finding safe places to rest and supporting each other during difficult moments. Through these experiences, they developed resilience, independence, and a sense of responsibility. The man continued to inspire them, even from a distance. They remembered the stories he had shared about perseverance, hope, and helping others. These stories became a guide for them, giving them strength to face challenges and make choices that would improve their lives. The boys often discussed what they would do once they reunited with the man, imagining ways they could show gratitude and help him as he had helped them. As weeks passed, the boys began to feel stronger, more capable, and more hopeful. They had faced difficult situations, but they had survived and learned from them. They realized that the skills, knowledge, and courage they had gained from the man were their most valuable tools. They had grown in ways they had never imagined, and they began to see a future that was brighter and more promising. Despite the challenges, the bond between the boys grew deeper. They relied on each other for comfort, advice, and encouragement. They shared dreams, fears, and small victories. Each day they reminded themselves of the man's lessons and the hope he had instilled in them. This gave them motivation to keep moving forward, even when the world seemed harsh and unforgiving. The boys also discovered the power of gratitude and compassion during this time. They began to help other children they met on the streets, sharing food, offering advice, and protecting those who were weaker. They realized that even small acts of kindness could make a difference. They understood that the man's teachings were not just about survival, but about creating a ripple of hope and support that could reach others in need. Finally, after many weeks of struggle, the boys received news that they could return to the shelter. They felt relief and joy, knowing they would be reunited with the man and return to a place of safety. As they walked back, they reflected on the lessons they had learned, the challenges they had overcome, and the growth they had achieved. They understood that, even in difficult times, hope and perseverance could guide them. When they arrived at the shelter, the man was waiting for them. He greeted them warmly, proud of how they had handled the separation and the challenges they faced. The boys felt a deep sense of accomplishment and gratitude. They realized that the man's guidance had prepared them for the hardships of life and that they were now stronger, wiser, and more capable. In that moment, the boys understood the true value of the man's care and mentorship. He had not only given them hope, but also the skills, knowledge, and confidence to face the world on their own. They felt inspired to continue learning, growing, and helping others, knowing that one day they could repay the kindness and guidance they had received. The experiences of separation and struggle had taught them resilience, courage, and the importance of hope. And they carried these lessons with them as they began the next chapter of their lives. The boys returned to the shelter with a renewed sense of hope and confidence. The experiences they had faced while apart from the man had taught them resilience, courage, and the importance of trust and friendship. They walked through the doors and felt the warmth and safety of a place that had become familiar and comforting. The man was there waiting for them, his eyes reflecting pride and care. He smiled at them, and the boys realized that they had grown stronger and wiser since the last time they had been together. Over the following months, the boys began to build their lives in small but meaningful ways. They continued to learn from the man, who guided them in education, work, and personal development. He introduced them to books, taught them how to manage money, and helped them develop skills that would allow them to find opportunities beyond the streets. The boys eagerly absorbed every lesson, understanding that each step forward brought them closer to a future they had once thought impossible. They discovered new opportunities for learning and growth. The man encouraged them to attend classes, read extensively, and practice skills that would help them secure jobs. The boys embraced these opportunities, recognizing that knowledge and preparation were keys to building a better life. They worked hard, sometimes struggling with doubts and setbacks, but the man remained patient and encouraging. He reminded them that progress was gradual, that perseverance was more important than speed. The boys also became more confident in their interactions with others. They had learned how to communicate respectfully, ask for help politely, and build relationships based on trust and understanding. These skills allowed them to navigate the city with more ease and to find people who could assist them. They realized that the world was not only harsh, but also full of potential allies who could support them if they approached situations with care, respect. As they gained stability, the boys never forgot the man who had guided them. They often spoke about ways they could show gratitude, thinking of small and meaningful ways to repay his kindness. They wanted to demonstrate that the hope and care he had given them had not been wasted, and that they were determined to succeed and live purposeful lives. The man encouraged their thoughts, telling them that the best way to honor kindness was to grow, help others, and remain true to their values. The boys began to plan for their futures. They dreamed of finishing school, finding stable jobs, and helping people in situations like the one they had faced. They imagined a life where they could give back, just as the man had given to them. These dreams motivated them to work harder, focus on learning, and build skills that would be valuable in the years to come. The man reminded them that dreams became reality when combined with consistent effort and belief in oneself. They also learned about responsibility and independence. The man allowed them to make small decisions on their own, guiding them gently when needed. This helped the boys understand that they had the power to shape their lives, and that mistakes were opportunities for learning. They became more confident in taking initiative, problem-solving, and making choices that would benefit their future. Along the way, the boys faced challenges. but they were prepared to handle them with the lessons they had learned. They dealt with setbacks calmly, supporting each other and applying the guidance the man had given them. They discovered that challenges were not just obstacles, but chances to demonstrate resilience, patience, and determination. Each small victory reinforced their confidence and strengthened their belief in a better future. The man continued to mentor them, teaching lessons about empathy, leadership, and generosity. He explained that helping others could create a ripple effect of positive change. The boys absorbed these teachings and began to act on them, offering support to younger children in the shelter, sharing knowledge, and providing encouragement. They realized that the impact of kindness extended beyond themselves and could influence the lives of many. As the boys grew, they began to take on small responsibilities within the shelter. They helped organize meals, guided new arrivals, and assisted in maintaining order. These tasks taught them accountability and gave them a sense of purpose. They realized that their experiences on the streets had given them insight and skills that could be valuable to others in similar situations. They found satisfaction in helping and mentoring, mirroring the care they had received from the man. The man observed their growth with pride and quiet satisfaction. He saw two boys who had once been lost and hopeless now becoming confident, compassionate, and capable young men. He continued to guide them, encouraging them to pursue education, practice life skills, and maintain their values. He reminded them that their journey was ongoing and that continued effort, patience, and kindness would open doors to new opportunities. As the years passed, the boys began to establish connections outside the shelter. They found part-time work, joined community programs, and built friendships that were positive and supportive. They discovered that the world was full of possibilities when approached with courage, patience, and integrity. They understood that while challenges would always exist, their knowledge, skills, and determination could help them navigate these challenges successfully. The boys never lost sight of the man who had transformed their lives. They often spoke about the moments they had spent together, the lessons they had learned, and the hope that had been planted in their hearts. They felt deep gratitude and a desire to repay his kindness, knowing that one day they would have the chance to make a meaningful difference in his life. The man encouraged this desire, telling them that true gratitude was expressed through action, growth, and the helping of others. They also reflected on the lessons they had learned about resilience, courage, and hope. They realized that while the world could be unpredictable and challenging, they had the tools to navigate it. They understood that success was not only measured by material gain, but also by the ability to remain kind, compassionate, and committed to helping others. These lessons became guiding principles for their daily lives and long-term goals. The boys began to plan for the future with renewed purpose. They set goals for education, career, and community involvement. They discussed ways to support those who were struggling, sharing the knowledge and care they had received. They felt empowered by the idea that they could contribute to the world and make a difference, just as the man had made a difference in their lives. Through consistent effort, dedication, and the guidance of the man, the boys began to see tangible progress. They completed courses, learned new skills, and gained confidence in their abilities. They understood that their past did not define them, and that each day offered an opportunity to grow and improve. They felt proud of their achievements and motivated to continue on their journey toward a better life. The man continued to be a source of wisdom and encouragement. He shared stories of perseverance, leadership, and generosity, reminding the boys that they had the potential to inspire others as well. He encouraged them to embrace challenges, seek knowledge, and maintain their integrity. The boys absorbed these teachings and applied them in their interactions with others, becoming role models for those around them. As came to an end, the boys were no longer the frightened and hopeless children who had first met the man. They had grown into young men with confidence, skills, and a vision for the future. They had learned the value of education, responsibility, and compassion. Most importantly, they had learned that hope, once planted, could grow into strength, resilience, and the ability to help others. They felt ready to face the world, guided by the lessons and love of the man who had changed their lives and inspired them to become the best versions of themselves. The boys had grown into young men full of knowledge, skills, and hope. They had faced challenges, learned lessons, and developed a sense of responsibility that guided their actions. They often spoke about the man who had changed their lives and how much they wanted to show their gratitude. Over the years, they had saved money, built connections, and learned about opportunities that could help them make a difference not only for themselves, but for the man who had given them so much. One day they learned that the man was in trouble. He had been falsely accused of something he had not done and was at risk of losing his freedom. The news hit them hard, and they felt a deep sense of urgency. They knew that he had once saved them from hopelessness, and now it was their turn to act. They began to plan carefully, using the knowledge, skills, and resources they had acquired over the years. The young men worked together to gather evidence that proved the man's innocence. They contacted people he had helped, seeking support and testimony. They visited offices, spoke to authorities, and collected documents that could clarify the truth. Each step was challenging, requiring patience, courage, and determination. They encountered obstacles, including disbelief from some people and bureaucratic delays. But they refused to give up. During this process, the young men also relied on the lessons the man had taught them about integrity and honesty. They knew they could not compromise their values even under pressure. They approached every task with respect, careful communication, and persistence. They encouraged each other, remembering the times they had overcome hardships together on the streets and in their early days at the shelter. As the days passed, the young men began to see progress. Authorities started reviewing the evidence and questioning the claims made against the man. The boys felt hope rising within them, believing that justice would eventually be served. They worked tirelessly, driven by gratitude, loyalty, and the desire to repay the man for the life-changing guidance he had given them while handling this challenge. The young men also supported the community that had helped them grow. They assisted children and teenagers in the shelter, teaching them small skills, offering encouragement, and sharing lessons about hope, perseverance, and self-respect. They understood that their journey was not only about rescuing the man, but also about giving back to others and continuing the ripple of kindness and guidance. They had received the young men faced moments of doubt, especially when progress seemed slow. They sometimes worried that the man might never be free and that their efforts would fail. In those moments, they reminded each other of the strength they had gained through their experiences, the lessons of resilience they had learned from the man, and the importance of never giving up. This mutual encouragement kept them motivated and focused. Finally, after weeks of hard work, persistence, and careful planning, the day came when the man's innocence was recognized. The authorities acknowledged the evidence provided by the young men and cleared his name. The man was free, and he was greeted by the two young men who had once been homeless children under his care. The reunion was filled with emotion, relief, and unspoken gratitude. The young men had kept their promise to repay his kindness, and the man felt proud and humbled by their dedication and success. The experience reinforced the lessons the young men had learned throughout their lives. They realized that hope, guidance, and perseverance could create change even in the most difficult situations. They understood the importance of loyalty, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. They also saw that the acts of kindness and mentorship the man had provided years earlier had created a ripple effect that extended beyond themselves. In the days following the man's release, the young men and the man began to rebuild a life together. They worked on community projects, helped those in need, and continued to grow as individuals. The young men pursued education and career opportunities, using the skills and knowledge they had gained over the years. The man supported them, guiding them when needed, but allowing them to take responsibility and make independent choices. They also dedicated themselves to helping children and young people in difficult situations, sharing the lessons and hope they had received. They understood that a single act of kindness could change lives. They wanted to continue the legacy of guidance, care, and encouragement. They taught resilience, self-respect, and the importance of belief in oneself, inspiring others to pursue a better future. Over time, the young men established stable lives. They had jobs, homes, and communities that supported their growth and well-being. They continued to visit the shelter, mentor children, and provide guidance to those who needed hope. They realized that their success was not only a personal achievement, but also a reflection of the man's influence and the lessons he had instilled in them. The man watched with pride as the young men flourished. He saw the results of his care, guidance, and mentorship reflected in their actions, choices, and dedication to helping others. He understood that the kindness and hope he had given years earlier had created a lasting impact. The young men had repaid him with their dedication, loyalty, and the continued growth they had achieved. The story of the man and the young men became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of guidance and mentorship. It showed that even in the most difficult circumstances, compassion, care, and perseverance could create meaningful change. The young men and the man continued to inspire others, demonstrating that life could be transformed through trust, support, and belief in the potential of every individual. Through this journey, the young men understood the importance of gratitude, responsibility, and purpose. They knew that life's challenges could be overcome with determination, courage, and the support of those who cared. They carried forward the lessons of hope, resilience, and kindness, ensuring that the legacy of the man who had changed their lives would continue to influence others for years to come. In the end, the man and the young men stood together, stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They had faced struggles, celebrated victories, and grown together through experiences that tested their strength and determination. They had learned that hope and guidance could transform lives, that perseverance could overcome adversity, and that kindness could create a ripple effect of positive change. The young men had repaid the man who had given them so much by standing by him, supporting him, and ensuring that his freedom and dignity were restored. Their journey demonstrated that true success was measured not only by personal growth, but also by the impact one could have on the lives of others, creating a cycle of hope, care, transformation that could continue indefinitely. After the young men had helped the man regain his freedom, their lives and his continued to change in ways they had never imagined. Life had become more stable, and the lessons they had learned from hardship and guidance now shaped how they approached the world. The man continued to mentor them, but now the relationship was more balanced, with the young men contributing ideas, energy, and support. They all began to focus on helping others, realizing that the hope and guidance they had received could be extended to people who were struggling in similar ways. The young men decided to create a small community program aimed at helping children and teenagers living on the streets or in shelters. They wanted to provide mentorship, education, and support, much like what they had received from the man years ago. They approached local organizations, explained their vision, and worked tirelessly to get the program running. The man supported their ideas, offering guidance but allowing them to take the lead. In the early days of the program, the young men faced challenges. Resources were limited, some children were wary of trust, and the community was skeptical. The young men remembered the lessons from their past and approached each obstacle patiently. They listened to the children, built trust slowly, and showed care through actions rather than words alone. Gradually, they began to make progress, and the children started participating, learning, and growing under their guidance. The man watched with pride as the young men applied everything he had taught them. They were patient, kind, and determined, just like he had been when they were younger. He continued to offer advice when needed, sharing his experiences and insights. The young men appreciated his wisdom, but felt confident in their ability to lead and make decisions for the program. Together, they created an environment where children felt safe, encouraged, and valued. As the program grew, the young men also focused on their personal development. They pursued education, training, and jobs that could provide financial stability. They balanced their work with mentoring, understanding that leading by example was important for the children they were helping. The man continued to support them, reminding them that the most meaningful achievements were those that also helped others. The young men faced moments of doubt and difficulty. Some days were exhausting, with many problems to solve and limited resources. They remembered their time on the streets and the lessons in perseverance, patience, and hope. These memories reminded them that challenges were temporary and that consistent effort could create lasting change. They encouraged each other, sharing responsibility and celebrating small victories to maintain morale. The community program began to gain recognition. Other adults in the neighborhood noticed the positive impact on the children and offered support. Donations of food, clothing, and educational materials helped the program grow. The young men felt proud that their efforts were making a difference, and the man reminded them that their success was built on compassion, determination, and the desire to help others. Over time, the program expanded to include workshops on life skills, education, and creativity. The young men taught children how to communicate respectfully, solve problems, and set goals. They encouraged the children to dream, emphasizing that their current situations did not define their future. The man shared stories of his own experiences, showing the children that change was possible even in difficult circumstances. The young men also emphasized teamwork and friendship, teaching children to support each other and work together to achieve common goals. They shared the lessons they had learned about loyalty, perseverance, and kindness, reinforcing the idea that success and happiness were built on relationships and care for others. The children began to trust them, showing signs of growth, confidence, and resilience. The young men, and the children formed a close-knit community where each person learned from the other. The young men saw the children as a reflection of their own past. They felt motivated to ensure that each child received guidance, hope, and encouragement. The man observed with quiet pride, understanding that his early influence had multiplied through the actions of the young men in addition to the program. The young men worked on improving their own lives. They sought education, career opportunities, and stable housing. They knew that their stability and success would allow them to support the program and serve as examples to the children. The man continued to provide mentorship, emphasizing the importance of balance, integrity, and purpose. The young men also strengthened their friendship with the man. Sharing responsibilities and decision-making, they planned events, coordinated activities, and developed strategies to expand the program. Their teamwork created a supportive and productive environment where ideas flowed freely and efforts were appreciated. The man admired how they had grown into responsible, compassionate, and capable individuals. As the months passed, the program continued to thrive. Children who had once been afraid, lonely, or hopeless began to show confidence, curiosity, and a willingness to learn. The young men and the man celebrated small achievements, understanding that growth often happened gradually and quietly. They encouraged the children to keep trying, learn from mistakes, and believe in themselves. The young men also used the program to teach children about kindness, empathy, and responsibility. They encouraged the children to help one another and to find ways to give back to the community. The man emphasized that the true measure of success was the positive impact they could have on others. And the young men modeled this principle through their actions. Through this process, the young men reflected on how far they had come since their days on the streets. They understood that the lessons, support, and guidance from the man had changed the course of their lives. They felt deep gratitude and responsibility, realizing that they had the power to continue the ripple of hope that had once been given to them. The young men also strengthened their connection with the larger community. They built partnerships with local schools, organizations, and volunteers, ensuring that the program could grow and reach more children. They shared their story, showing how mentorship, trust, and kindness could transform lives. The man supported their efforts. He was proud of how they were using their experiences to make a meaningful difference. Over time, the young men and the man saw lasting results. Children who had once been on the streets began to gain confidence, learn new skills, and build relationships. Families and neighbors noticed positive changes, reinforcing the value of the program and inspiring others to help. The young men felt fulfilled, understanding that their efforts were creating a legacy of hope and guidance. the man and the young men continued to work together, each contributing their strengths and ideas. They focused on sustaining the program, ensuring that future generations of children would have access to mentorship, support, and opportunities. The young men understood that the lessons they had learned about perseverance, kindness, and hope were now their responsibility to pass on. In this way, the story of the man and the young men continued. They had faced challenges, celebrated victories, and created a community built on trust, support, and compassion. The children in the program thrived, inspired by the guidance and example of those who had once been in their situation. The man, proud of their growth, watched as the young men carried forward the lessons he had given, extending hope and opportunity to others as came to a close. The young men had become leaders, mentors, and role models. They had learned that life could be transformed through kindness, perseverance, and guidance. They had repaid the man who had saved them by standing by him, supporting him, and creating a legacy of hope that would continue for years. The journey showed that one act of care could change many lives, and that hope, once planted, could grow into strength, resilience, and a force for good in the world.